Hello, my name is Monica Baranek, and I am a Bachelor's of Science degree in biology candidate at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And this is my final project submission for Botany 450. So my final project is a field guide to some of the endemic Hawaiian insects that we have here. So my dedication is to my niece Alice, who is she's about to turn 6 and is starting to express interest and excitement for science. So my hope with this field guide is to inspire her and other children around her age to be curious about the world around them and to start to appreciate and understand the diversity of not just insects, but of all plants and animals wherever you may live, but especially in Hawaii because it's such a unique place and has such unique resources to support a lot of diversity. So the unique geographic location of the Hawaiian Islands make them a perfect home for many special plants and animals that are only found here. This book is a collection of only a few of the endemic Hawaiian insects that inhabit these islands and their unique behaviors. The definition of endemic means that a plant or animal is native to and restricted to a certain place. So that's just repeating the statement that because Hawaii is so unique, it has a lot of species that are only found here. The first species that I want to talk about are the yellow-faced bees. And so they all belong to a certain group or genus called Hylaeus, which was first described by Fabricius in 1793. So this genus contains about 63 endemic species, 7 of which were placed on the endangered species list in 2016. Today, all yellow-faced bees are only found on 3 sites on Oahu. The biggest threats to these bees are habitat loss, invasive species, rising sea levels, and the use of agricultural pesticides. So the bees that live in Hawaii are they usually inhabit coastal areas, which is why rising sea levels is such a big threat to their populations, because as the sea rises and gets closer to the land or covers land, it takes away those potential habitats that those bees could live in. Agricultural pesticides are a big threat as well. Just like the bee species that we might be more familiar with on the mainland, the yellow-faced bees are really important pollinators for our food and for other native plant species. So by increasing pesticides, we're also increasing the level of toxins and poisons that these bees are exposed to. So they play a very important role in pollinating endemic plants and crops, especially the native Hawaiian naupaka shrub. And the naupaka is typically a coastal plant, so it's in the same habitat that the bees are most commonly found in. But since they've been added to the endangered species list, more federal funding has been allocated for conservation efforts. This has opened the door for more bee species on the mainland to be classified as endangered and more conservation actions to be put in place. So even though it's a bad thing that these bees are endangered, it's pretty much forced scientists and government agencies to assess the populations, assess the threats, and to take action with different laws and money to preserve their numbers and to help their populations become stable and to grow. Because pollinators and bees in particular are so important for pollinating the food that we eat, So our success as a species, as humans, is really closely tied with the success of pollinators, and in Hawaii, especially with these yellow-faced bees. So the next species is this little damselfly called the Oceanic Hawaiian Damselfly. And the scientific name is the Megalagrion oceanicum, which was first described by McLaughlin in 1883. So this endangered damselfly species is only found on Oahu in the Ko'olau mountain range. They are small, so the average body length is only 2 inches and their wingspan is about 2.2 inches. So this picture here is of a male damselfly, and you can tell the males and females apart because the males tend to have really striking red and black markings, whereas the females are usually a pale green color. So these damselflies breed in stream rapids and on waterfall faces, and then they lay their eggs in the plants that grow near these bodies of water. Their biggest threats are habitat loss, diseases, and invasive species, especially the poecilid fish. So this is a really small fish that was first introduced on Oahu as a biological control method for other insect pest species. But as an unintended side effect, these fish have had devastating effects on the populations of native Odonata species. So Odonata is just another classification to describe a certain group of insects. So Odonata contains damselflies and dragonflies as well. So even though they weren't introduced to this island as a way to eat these native Odonata species, it has been an unfortunate side effect that these fish have caused such a devastating decrease to these damselfly numbers. So this little guy is a grasshopper moth, and its scientific name is the Thyrocoppa apatella, and it was first described by Walsingham in 1907. So this little moth is only found on one place on Earth, and that's the summit of Haleakala Mountain on the island of Maui. And because their habitat has been invaded by invasive ant species, the moths only live at elevations of 2,900 meters or higher. So as the invasive ant populations have grown and have crawled further up the mountain, it has forced these moths to get higher and higher up the mountain so they don't suffer predation from these ants. So the extreme winds that occur at the top of Haleakala have caused some very unique traits to develop within this moth. So the caterpillars spin webs between rocks to catch the leaves that they eat. So they kind of behave like spiders. They spin webs with silk that they produce in order to catch their prey, even though their prey is leaves. The adults have short, underdeveloped wings, and that means that they're flightless. And they also have very strong leg muscles and can hop along the ground up to 10 times their body length. So their bodies are usually about 10 millimeters, which means they can jump about 100 millimeters across the ground. And there aren't any other moth species that I know of that have this characteristic of being able to jump along the ground like that. This next species is one of 2 endemic butterflies to the Hawaiian Islands, and that's called the Koa Butterfly. The scientific name is Udara blackburni, and it was first described by Tooley in 1878. So this small butterfly has green coloring on the outside of its wings for camouflage when it's feeding. So when it's feeding, it's landing on plants, and its wings are straight up so it can blend into the leaves that it's feeding near or it's standing on while it's feeding. And the blue-brown coloring on the inside of their wings helps them blend in when they're flying. So the caterpillars feed on the leaves of the koa and the ali'i trees, while the adults drink the nectar from the flowers of these same plants. So they can be found on all of the main Hawaiian islands, except Niihau and Kaho'olawe. And they're really small. Their wingspan is only about 1 inch. All right, so this next insect is called the wikiu bug. Its scientific name is Nysius wikilicola, and it was first described by Ashlock and Gagny in 1983. So this is kind of like the grasshopper moth. It's only found on one place, and that's at the summit of Mauna Kea on Maui. And it's a predator scavenger that preys on low elevation insects that fly near the summit and get stuck due to the wind and the cold temperatures. Because it lives in such an extreme environment, its wings appear underdeveloped because they don't use them to fly. So you can see from this picture, its wings are really short. It barely extends past their thorax. And the other insects that you might see, when they're grown up, their wings go all the way down to the end of their abdomen. So this is a really unusual trait to see. Their long legs help them scramble over rocky terrain. And because that it's so cold, they have developed a high concentration of glycerol, which is a sugar, within their blood. So that acts as an antifreeze, so they don't freeze to death in these harsh temperatures. Okay, so this next little guy is the Hawaiian stag beetle. The scientific name is Apterocyclus honoluluensis, and it was first described by Waterhouse in 1871. So despite its name, the honoluluensis, this beetle is only found in the Koki State Park region of Kauai. So it's not even found in Honolulu. They are primarily decomposers, eating only dead plant matter, especially koa logs. So they're a really important part of ecosystems. They help break down organic material and help reintroduce nutrients back into the ecosystem. So they're flightless and they're rarely encountered due to severe habitat loss and severe predation from invasive rat species. Because their small populations make them hard to observe, not a lot is known about them. So there's still a lot to be discovered about these little guys. So this picture is showing a female, and you can tell it's a female because at the bottom here at their abdomen, it's rounded, and males of this species have a pointed abdomen. And they're kind of would be considered a larger beetle, a medium to large beetle. Their entire body length is about 14 to 21 millimeters. Okay, so this next genus, this next group is called Hyposmocoma, which was first described by Butler in 1881. So this single group, this single genus, holds over 400 individual species of moths, which can all be traced back to one common ancestor or a group of common ancestors from the remote northwest Hawaiian Islands. So from one little group of moths, over 400 species that are genetically distinct from each other have arisen. So Hyposmocoma caterpillars make cases to protect themselves, and the cases that they make are varied in shape, and they're unique to the environments that each species lives in. So when scientists come across these casings, some of them may look like burritos, or some of them may look like cones, and each of those unique shapes is telling of where this caterpillar lives, like what kind of environment. Do they live in water? Do they live on the like the surface? You know, is is a defining characteristic. So some of these species have caterpillars that are aquatic, like I mentioned. So some of these caterpillars are able to live under stream beds, and they spin silk, which allows them to attach to the bottom of streams so they don't get washed away. Some of the caterpillars are cannibals, so they will eat, their relatives or other caterpillars, and some of the caterpillars eat snails. So most caterpillar species are herbivores, so they only eat plants. So the fact that there are a number of species within this one group that eat other caterpillars or eat snails is really unique. And the same with being aquatic. That's not something that is ever seen in other moth species. So all of these behaviors are extremely unusual for moths, and they're only seen in this one group of Hyposmocoma. All right, so this next insect is called the koa bug. Its scientific name is Coleoptis blackburnea, and it was first described by White in 1881. So this, the koa bug is also called the stinkless stink bug, and that's because even though it kind of looks like a typical stink bug, and it's related to stink bugs, it doesn't produce those same chemicals that give that characteristic stink. So they're found typically on all of the main Hawaiian islands. They feed on the ali'i bushes and the koa trees, and they use their piercing and sucking mouth parts, it's kind of like a pointy straw, to suck out fluids from the stems, leaves, seeds, and roots. Unfortunately, their populations have been decreasing significantly due to habitat loss and predation from invasive ant species, parasitoid wasps, and birds. So they're really difficult to find nowadays if you go out just on a normal hike or a walk around Hawaii. Once, in recent history, you might be able to see a lot of koa bugs, but now they've been really hard to find. There have been scientists and researchers who have been breeding them in captivity and have been reintroducing them to the natural environment, which is great. And they're pretty small. Their body length is only about 1 inch. All right, so this next group is called the Hawaiian Vinegar Fly. And this, they're all contained in a group or genus called Drosophila. So Drosophila were first described by Phelan in 1823. They're known sometimes as fruit flies, but that is not a correct name. Fruit flies are another group of insects. So Drosophila are vinegar flies, not fruit flies. So this fly genus, this one group of Drosophila, is one of the best known examples of evolution and adaptive radiation. So currently there are approximately 550 described endemic Drosophila species, but there are almost 300 collected species that are at the Insect Museum at the University of Hawaii campus that are unknown. They haven't been described yet, they haven't been named, maybe they haven't had their complete genetic analysis done yet, but they are unknown species. So there are a lot of species within this one genus. And all of these individual species arose from a single introduction. So by adaptive radiation, that is saying that one little introduction, one little starter group has sprouted a lot of subsequent species. So this is similar to the Hyposmocoma, where from a little tiny starter kit, essentially a lot has come of that. So some species of these Drosophila have distinct markings on their wings, and that is pictured on the upper right corner. You can see the the picture wings of the Glabriopex, the Drosophila Glabriopex, which was described by Hardy and Kaneshiro in 1968. So you can see like the distinct brown pigmentation in some of the wing cells. So the markings on their picture wings could be used to attract mates, and they could be used for camouflage. They could be used for both. So Drosophila exhibit unusual mating rituals. So males will perform elaborate displays, or almost like dances, and emit certain buzzing noises in order to attract females. And the females, after all of the show from the males, sometimes these mating rituals last about 20 minutes, but the females basically have the final say as to whether or not they will mate with the male. Scientifically speaking, Drosophila are a model organism, which means that they're highly studied by a lot of scientific disciplines. So people in the fields of genetics or biology, ecology, study these organisms, especially this Drosophila melanogaster, which was first described by Megan in 1830, to better understand development and genetics, and how, you know, changing certain conditions affect development or genetic transfer, things like that. And by better understanding these model organisms, we have a better understanding of how mammals develop and how specifically humans develop. So they're very important to science. All right, so this little guy is called the Akoko plant hopper. Its scientific name is Dictyophodelphax mirabilis. And it was first described by Sweezy in 1907. And they're very small. They're usually less than or about 1/4 of an inch long. So this tiny plant hopper is only found on the island of Oahu. And if you look at this, it looks like it has a giant nose like an elephant, but that is called a caudal horn, and caudal just means head. So it's like a special horn that comes out of their head, and it's not a nose and it's not a mouth. So what scientists think that they use their horn for is to eat the toxic sap of the akoko tree. So part of their digestive tract extends into this horn, and it's most likely used to filter and detoxify the sap. So they're able to kind of filter out the poisonous stuff and able to eat it. And the poisonous stuff from this sap is most likely stored in the horn to discourage predators. And it also can serve as a way to camouflage as a thorn or a twig to evade predators. So in order to eat the sap, like the koa bug, they have piercing and sucking mouth parts to suck out the sap from the akoko trees. Another distinct classifying morphological trait is they have a set of feelers underneath their eyes. So sometimes, most of the time even, you might see insects with antennas on the front of their head or the top of their head, and these little guys have distinct feelers underneath their eyes. All right, so this last insect species is the second of the 2 endemic butterfly species. And this is the Kamehameha Butterfly, and the scientific name is Vanessa Kamehameha, and that was first described by Eschholz in 1821. So this butterfly species is found on all of the main Hawaiian islands. The caterpillars feed on the leaves of the shrubs that are in the family Urticaceae, and especially the native mamaki, and that's like a native sort of nettle shrub. Adults use their proboscis to feed on the sap of native forest trees, especially the koa and the nahio tree. And while they're not classified as endangered, their numbers and their population hasn't decreased to that level. There have been some population declines in recent years due to ant and bird predation, parasitism from wasps and flies, and habitat loss. So when we talk about parasitism from wasps and flies, that is usually talking about the caterpillars. So the ants and the birds typically feed on the adults, and the wasps and flies will feed on the caterpillars. The Kamehameha butterfly was declared the state insect of Hawaii in 2009. So it was pretty recent. In the past 11 years, this guy has been declared our state insect, which is pretty cool. And it is considerably bigger than the other endemic butterfly. So the Koa butterfly was only about an inch big, and the Kamehameha butterfly is about 3 inches long or wide. All right, so here are just some of the references that I've used, and I will submit this in another document so you can check them. But I just wanted to say thank you for a wonderful semester. This was a lovely project to end on, and I really enjoyed it. And I hope that maybe you learned something you didn't know before. But I just want to say thank you for a wonderful semester, and I hope you enjoyed it.